Lori Lee Farmer, Michelle Heather Hughes, and Doris Denise Milner didn't know each other when they were put into the same tent on the first day of Girl Scout camp in Oklahoma in the summer of 1977. But their names will be forever linked, victims of one of the most horrific unalivings in Oklahoma's history. At 8, Lori was the youngest girl at Camp Scott in Locust Grove, but she was unusually mature, the oldest of 5 girls in her family. Shy Michelle was 9 years old and had asked her mom to look after her plants while she was away. Denise, as she preferred to be called, was a 10-year-old straight-A student who was planning to attend camp with her friends. When they pulled out at the last minute, Denise wanted to pull out too, but her mom persuaded her to go on her own. On the first day of camp, it poured with rain, and the girls were sent to their tents to write letters home. Lori talked about how much fun she was having. "I've met 2 new friends, Michelle Hughes and Denise Milner," she wrote to her parents. Denise was less enthusiastic. "I don't like camp," she wrote to her mom. "It's awful. I don't want to stay in camp for 2 weeks. I want to come home." The 3 girls were in Tent 8, the furthest away from the counselor's tent. Being the first night at camp, there was a lot of excitement, and counselors Carla Wilhite and Dee Elder had to get up a couple of times during the night to ask giggling girls to quieten down and go to sleep. But it wasn't just the sound of giggling that the counselors heard. They heard a low, guttural sound, something in between a growl or a moan coming from the woods. Carla, who was 18 years old and on her first night as a counselor, thought it must be an animal. As she walked towards the sound, it stopped. When she walked away, it started again. She was too frightened to investigate further. "I didn't want anything to pounce out of the woods at me," she says. "Whatever it was, I didn't want to tangle with it." Carla may have been hearing the final moments of one of the girls as she walked back to her tent. "You know, when I look back at it now, though, I regret. I have guilt that I didn't go there." At 6 a.m., Carla got up to have an early shower. She saw 3 sleeping bags on the ground outside. The bodies of Lori, Michelle, and Denise were underneath them. The girls had been inappropriately assaulted, bound with duct tape, and unalived. All the other Girl Scouts were quickly put on a bus and sent back to their parents.
Police began their investigation. The girls' tent was damaged, and there was blood on the floor and mattresses, with one obvious shoe print. Near the bodies, police found rope, a pair of women's glasses, and a torch with newspaper shoved inside. In a nearby cave, there was some of the same duct tape found on the girls' bodies, pages from the same newspaper found inside the torch, black and white photos of 3 women at a formal event, and writing on the wall. The unaliver was, "Here, bye-bye fools." The black and white photos were soon identified as having been taken at the wedding of the daughter of an employee of the Granite Reformatory, a jail in Oklahoma. The photographer's assistant at the wedding, who had printed those photos, was a Granite Reformatory inmate called Jean Leroy Hart. Hart quickly became the prime suspect in the Girl Scout Unalivings. He was a former high school sports star who had turned to crime in his early 20s. In 1966, he was charged with kidnapping 2 pregnant teenagers. He pleaded guilty and was sent to jail, but paroled after just a few months. After committing a string of burglaries, he was known for stealing glasses because he had bad eyesight. He ended up back in court because he committed the burglaries while on parole. He was sentenced to more than 300 years jail. He escaped in 1973, 10 months after the Girl Scout Unalivings. Following the biggest manhunt in Oklahoma history, Hart was finally captured and charged. A member of the Cherokee Nation, Hart had a huge number of supporters in the local community who were convinced of his innocence. They held a fundraiser to help with legal fees. The police case was not as strong as they had hoped it would be. The shoe print found inside the girls' tent wasn't the same size as Hart's foot, and, although the police claimed a fingerprint had been found on one of the girls' bodies, it turned out to belong to a police officer. A jury found Hart not guilty, but he still had his 300-year-plus sentence to serve, so he was sent back to jail. He died 2 months later, after having a heart attack while exercising. So if Hart didn't unalive Lori, Michelle, and Denise, who did? 2 months before the unalivings, a note was left inside an empty donut box at the campsite. "We are on a mission to unalive 3 girls in Tent 1. The note read, but it also contained statements about Martians. It wasn't taken seriously at the time, or even after the murders. District Attorney Sid Wise told the New York Times in 1978 the note was probably a prank. Over the years, police have investigated and eliminated numerous other suspects. DNA testing carried out in the 1980s allowed police to rule out several men as being the unaliver, but not Hart. The results of further DNA testing released in May this year, pointed even more strongly to Hart's guilt. Our belief is that Jean Leroy Hart committed the Unalivings, Andrea Fielding, the director of Forensic Science Services at the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, said. Denise's mother Betty has been convinced of Hart's guilt ever since sitting through his trial. She's only visited her daughter's grave once, preferring not to think of her in the ground. She sees Denise in one of her granddaughters, Morgan. She has the same personality. Betty told Tulsa World in 2022, she wants to be a part of everything. She tries to join everything like Denise did. Meanwhile, Lori's mother, Sherry, told Tulsa World that she was at peace. But that didn't mean closure. When I sit down for my birthday with my daughters, you'll see me laughing, and yet, I'm aware we're not all there, and that's still real. As for Carla, the camp counselor who discovered the girls' bodies, she felt the need to help somebody afterwards and became a police officer, then an occupational therapist. She has never met any of the parents of the 3 girls. She says she can't face them because she's always felt guilty about that night. I didn't discover what was happening, she explained in June 2022. I haven't had a good night's sleep, the sleep of the innocent, you know, the deep, restful sleep, since 1977. DNA testing performed in 1989 was officially inconclusive, as it did reconfirm Hart, a member of the Cherokee Nation, as a suspect, but did not narrow the pool of possible suspects enough, showing that it applied to 1 in 7,700 Native Americans. DNA testing performed in 2017, taking advantage of a further 28 years of advances in testing, strongly suggests Hart's involvement in the crime, though the case remains officially unsolved.